Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Quick Magic gameplay. This time around I am running a little bit of a silly strat here in this matchup of Greenskins against Lizardmen on the map to Dragon's Cave. We are running an all Vanguard build. And now it's not something you usually expect from Greenskins, and obviously it cannot be an Orc based build because none of the Orc units in the game are actually a Vanguard. But the vast majority actually of the Goblin units do have Vanguard deployment, and if you're willing to build an army around that, if you're willing to accept very low leadership and just struggles with that, then you can actually get a pretty decent Vanguard capable army. So that is what I've kind of attempted to do here, and yeah, let's kind of break things down. So right off the bat, for my lord, I did bring Azag, and actually this is the only non-goblin unit in this army. The reason I brought Azag is because I wanted to bring a lord that can quickly reach the fight. This wasn't necessarily meant to be a goblin-oriented build. This was meant to be a Vanguard build. So I wasn't going for the theme of goblins, so I wasn't really concerned about bringing Skarsnik. Azag, of course, causes terror. He's a very solid melee combatant with very high charge bonus, decent weapon strength with armor piercing, and of course, good old Fate of Buna. Soul Blight, which I figured could be decent against lizards, and of course, Spirit Leech. So he's a very well-rounded kind of combat lord, and despite having fairly low armor, he's actually going to be pretty tanky against, for example, the Lizardman missiles, because Lizardman missiles tend to lack armor piercing, or lack much in the way of armor piercing. Now, for my front line, it's composed of really the only units you can bring. If you can bring either Night Goblins or Night Goblin Fanatics. I decided to go with Vanilla Night Goblins because honestly, Fanatics do much better against, say, squishy enemies like swordsmen or low HP, to be specific, I guess, infantry like swordsmen or elven spears or that sort of stuff. They don't really perform anywhere near as well against the high HP per model spread out Saurus warriors. So I decided to bring the Vanilla Night Goblins because otherwise they're identical to Fanatics. And I mixed in a unit of the Warlords boys on one end as well as the AP Cloonies on the other end. And now the Warlords boys do cause armor sundering, which I think could be useful against Lizardmen, who, of course, the Saurus warriors have decent armor at 60, but if you drop that by 30, it goes down to 30, which is much weaker. And of course, these guys are immune to psychology. The AP Cloonies are completely immune to psychology, and they're actually a unit of Fanatics, so they can actually throw out that little spell. Otherwise, the front line is composed of Night Goblins, and these guys will rout very, very easily from terror, but I'm hoping that between poison and decent melee, vaguely passable melee stats, these guys will be able to just hold out long enough for my main damage forces to really do something. And the main source of damage here is a mix of Night Goblin Archers and Nasty Skulkers. These guys are backed up by a single Night Goblin Shaman, who I did bring in with Sneaky Stabbing, Itchy Nuisance, and good old Wand of Jet, which is an increase to power reserve and power recharge rate. It's a single use, but still very potent. For shooting, of course, Night Goblin Archers. These guys are invisible. They do cause poison damage, which will be very good for crowd controlling my opponent. They are fairly well spread out here, so my opponent will struggle to kind of shut all of them down because, of course, Lizardmen cannot field as many units as Orcs can. And I do have a unit of the Rusty Arrows here, so I have 5 units of Night Goblin Archers and a single unit of Rusty Arrows just to provide that armor sundering. And I'm also kind of hoping that these guys can focus down enemy monstrous units and just kind of to keep them off my infantry. Finally, here in the back, we do have 4 units of Nasty Skulkers, veteraned up, and that is for a mix of reasons, partially to give them better melee stats, but also to boost their leadership, because these guys are really my monster hunting units, and I'm hoping to use them to shut down enemy monsters that try to rampage into my backline. With their smoke bomb, they can reduce their mobility to practically nil, and with their armor piercing and decent melee stats, they'll be able to tear through, say, even Krokar, much less, say, Bastillodon very, very quickly. On the flanks, I do have some units of Night Goblin Squig Hoppers, and we can see the badge immediately starts, so we're going to slow-mo. I have a unit of Night Goblin Squig Hoppers on one end, and a unit of the Durkid Squigs on the other. And these guys are being engaged upon, or at least some of these units are being engaged upon immediately by my opponent's Chameleon Skinks. I'm hoping the Durkid Squigs can just provide me with Squigs could provide me some kind of support, just being able to flank around, get behind my opponent's line, and provide damage against units of opportunity. For my opponent, he did bring the mighty Krokar atop Grimlock, so just a very solid melee lord. I don't think it needs much explaining, and of course with his terror and high damage, he can be very potent against these sort of cheapo goblin units. A front line composed of Saurus warriors with shields, which will of course mitigate quite a bit of the goblin damage, with some Saurus spears without shields, so these guys will be much more susceptible, but these guys are much less useful given that the anti-large bonus is largely useless against my army. And then Sking Priest of Beast as well as Sking Chief on Pterodons, with, of course, Flock of Doom could be very, very potent. Wisdom's Wild Form okay at buffing, and given my lack of armor piercing, it could actually be pretty powerful as well. But Flock of Doom especially could be really potent here. And the King Chief just to provide some harass. Finally, there are a handful of sort of shooting units. There's a Bastiladon with a Revivification Crystal, 2 Bastiladon Soldier Engines, and these guys, of course, can kind of provide some supporting damage and supporting fire. In the back, my opponent has Vanguarded 2 units of Chameleon Skinks. These are a very popular pick, but as you can see, Azag's already on top of one unit, and I'm sending Dirkit Squigs after the other. Unfortunately for me, my opponent does drop a immediate Flock of Doom, which is really whittling down my goblins here. In spite of the fact that I'm kind of trying to focus on my opponent's troops with volleys of arrow fire, it's still a bit of a struggle, and you can see the front line is collapsing very, very quickly against the Stars Warriors. Though not actually as quickly as one would think, I guess, given that these guys do have much, much, much better stats than the goblins. And as you can see, though, the Warlords boys, thanks to their immunity to psychology and higher veterancy, are actually capable of holding reasonably well against multiple units of Stars Warriors. These archers here, you can see they're focusing down the Bastiladon. This one over Krokar, of course, just rampages through, but he is actually taking some damage in the process. He doesn't really go after Azag, who takes a nasty bit of a hit there, and is going to bail out pretty shortly. And you can see he's already lost about a third of his HP. But then at this point, Krokar is getting surrounded by nasty Skulkers, who will shortly be able to bomb him with a Smoke Bomb. And actually, Krokar really can't stand toe-to-toe with him. And I do hit him with Spirit Leech at this point. I'm just going to drain his life away. Here on the front line, I have dropped the Nichi Nuisance, just debuff these Stars Warriors, make him a little bit easier to beat. Over here on the flank, Night Goblin Squig Hoppers have gone in, just trying to tie down this Bastiladon, which they're doing pretty successfully. And in the meantime, you can see the Stars troops are actually falling apart. Their stats aren't the best, so despite kind of knocking out a lot of units, they're just not able to do enough damage. They do get terrified here by Azag, and that's actually going to open them up to being pursued off the field, because I have so many units that I can always commit a unit of goblins to chase them off, while the rest of my army turns around to fight my opponent elsewhere. My opponent can't really do that as effectively. You can see I do cast Wall here, just trying to focus down this Bastiladon with the Revivification Crystal, while focusing out these Stars Warriors here. You can see this annoying King Chief is still kind of pecking away at me, poking away with his blow darts, being a general nuisance. But it's something I'm simply going to have to accept, and I do start kind of sniping away at him with some arrow fire. Over here you can see the nasty Skulkers are actually doing quite a number on Krokar, who has dropped to about half of his HP. And these guys are just focusing him very, very hard. You can see his HP has dropping pretty significantly, especially between the fire from all these supporting Night Gobbos. And my opponent's infantry corps at this point is practically wiped out. You can see I'm just swamping these melee troops and or ranged, I guess, monsters. And with Smoke Bomb, you can see they're being completely crippled. And with 4 mobility, there's no way the Bastiladon can really escape. It can't really force path its way through, and it's just going to get swamped, routed, and then murdered on its way out once again, because I just have so many troops that I can commit to pursuit. Krokar still rampaging around. Of course, he's a very, very tough target. He does pop cold-blooded, which does, however, make him an easier target for the units pursuing him. You can see he's down to 50% speed thanks to the debuff from Poison. When he does pop cold-blooded, that drops even further down to 39, and he is using up his charges of cold-blooded just to keep Krokar alive, which is definitely a bit of a problem for my opponent, because it means his other units are being focused down pretty heavily. You can see Spirit Leech used to focus down the King Chief, force him away, even as Krokar is slowly but surely getting pecked away at by massed arrow fire. And eventually he's just going to run out of HP. He's no longer going to have the regen, and you can see he's already actually hit his healing cap, or almost hit his healing cap. In the meantime, though, my opponent's infantry has kind of been wiped out. You can see some of these Bastiladons have been wiped out. The Screen Priest is routing, and that's just going to mean that these nasty Skulkers can get set loose and pursue them down. You can see the Goblins are definitely doing a good job. Over here, you can see Krokar is about being hit by Smoke Bomb, which drops his mobility down. And this is his last charge of Cold-Blooded, but that drops his mobility down to 8 with the combination of Poison Smoke Bomb, which is really, really pretty powerful. And at this point, things are definitely looking really, really grim for my opponent. You can see a Flock of Doom has gone down. It's definitely melting my troops, but with the loss of most of his ground forces, my opponent is going to be limited to solely Krokar and a handful of heroes. You can see the balance of power is shifting in my favor. My opponent is down to his last dregs of troops. He's down to the last 15, but some of these are routing Stars Warriors and those sorts of units who are really not who are just don't really matter at this point. So really, it's only Krokar, the Skink Priest of Beasts, and 2 Bastiladons with solar engines, who are definitely not going to be in a good spot against Azag with his ability to just do quite a bit of damage with Spirit Leech and that sort of stuff. You can see I'm hitting Krokar with that, and it's kind of melting through. Wisdom's Wild Form is powerful, but the extra damage is not really worthwhile against nasty Skulkers or Goblin Archers, and honestly, the the Spirit Legion is just going to kind of melt through that anyway. You can see he's just very low on HP. He has no more heals. He is going to run down this poor Night Goblin Shaman who's just not capable of escaping. He's far too slow. But it's really this is an acceptable sacrifice. You can see up here, Azag is on the hunt, going after the Skink Priest of Beast. It's a very, very one-sided fight, even though this poor Night Goblin does go down over there. You can see his bundle of sackcloth there, just dead. But it really won't matter at this point. The Skink Priest is being chased off. Krokgar is being kind of mobbed and swamped by Night Goblins. You can see I'm bringing all these units back from the right flank where they were chasing off enemy troops. And at this point, it is end of game. So, a really fun build. I would say that as far as Vanguard comps go, Orcs are one of the more viable ones, surprisingly. Just because they can field a decent variety of Vanguard capable units. They have a Vanguard Cavalry, not amazing Vanguard Cavalry, but it's cavalry. They have Vanguard Infantry, they have Vanguard Archers, and even a Vanguard Hero in the form of the Night Goblin Shaman. Would I say they're a competitive would I say they're top tier competitive or top tier Vanguard faction? Certainly not. Where Beastmen, Wood Elves, and Dwarves can all make a Vanguard build that will essentially work against most factions. This is not really the case with the Greenskins. There are a lot of faction compositions that will just kind of stomp this build and crush it very, very easily. But nonetheless, it is an incredibly fun build. If you get to go against a faction, you can kind of just outnumber, swamp and gun down. It's a lot of fun. You can see the surprisingly, Nasty Skulkers actually traded incredibly effectively. You got all of these kills would have been on, or almost all of those kills would have been on Sarsh Warriors or better troops. And given that how cheap Nasty Skulkers are, they're only 500, and even with all his veterans, he's probably about 700. They perform very, very well. And the Smoke Bomb, they can just crowd control enemies. Even if you're not doing a Vanguard build, Nasty Skulkers are, in my opinion, one of those really hidden gems in some ways, and no pun intended on their stalking, but definitely I think a bit of a hidden gem in the Orc roster, because at 500 gold with a 76% slow, and these guys are very, very powerful for defending your backline on the budget. They can tear through cavalry. They do have a unique ability called Opportunist Murder, where when they're winning him in melee, they get significantly boosted melee stats, actually, both damage as well as attack. And so they're actually a very, very powerful unit for their price, and definitely is something I would kind of recommend trying to field in some of your Orc armies. Regardless, it was a lot of fun, like I said. I did think if you're going to do a Vanguard build with Goblins, I think something like this is generally the way you want to go. Maybe not exactly this, but something rather similar. Definitely want some of those more holding-oriented Night Goblin variants, and put some veterancy points into your Night Goblins or your Skulkers just to keep them around a little longer. Maybe more Squigs is also not a bad idea. Squigs and Squig Hoppers recently got buffed to have immunity to psychology, so that could definitely make them a little bit more viable in this sort of matchup. Regardless, definitely was a lot of fun. Good game to my opponent, Pionu. Pionu, yeah, that's a mature name there, but it's pretty funny. But good game to him. Had a lot of fun. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about Total War Warhammer or anything like that, be sure to post them down in the comments. I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.